Welcome to Response-Able Parenting, the podcast that shows you how to parent in alignment to your emotions, needs, and goals versus your programming, bad advice, and let's face it, outdated strategies that just don't work. You'll get in the trenches support on nervous system and emotional regulation, critical mindset shifts, stronger communication strategies, and more. In this podcast, you'll gain transformational tools that take you from reacting to every frustration to responding with clarity, regulation, and finally setting the example you desire for your kids. I'm Becky Jennings, your new parenting coach, and this is the Response-Able Parenting podcast. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. Today, we're talking all about you. We're moving away from the kids today. We're moving away from the ADHD today because Mama, you are very overwhelmed, and I get it. I am sitting here today with Dr. Ann Welsh, and we are going to be diving into the complexities of the ambitious mother, of why are we doing more than we've ever been doing before? Why, even though we're doing more than we've ever been doing before, why do we feel like we're not doing enough? So we're going to dive into the emotion of that. We're going to dive into how we can feed ourselves, nourish ourselves, and actually create some healthier habits and go away from this like just surviving the moment to actually thriving, as well as being ambitious, as well as, meeting the goals that we're really hoping to meet. So Dr. Ann Welsh, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this.
Me too. Me too. I'm going to touch upon something right out the gate. Maybe it's a heavy hitter right out the gate. And it's something that I feel on a regular basis. And it's something that I check myself on all the time. I check my nervous system on it all the time. I feel like I'm having this conversation on a daily, but it's like I'm doing so much. My calendar is maxed. My kids' calendar is maxed. We're still spending social time together. We're still cuddling on the couch. We're still doing all these really wonderful, important things. And yet I still feel like I'm failing. What is that? Why do we put so much pressure on ourselves?
Yeah. And I think it's kind of a two-part answer, like the systems level and then the individual level. On a systems level, we are being asked to do more than ever before, right? And so we've escalated what we're asking people to do from a work perspective in terms of being constantly available, right? It's like, yeah, we can work from home, but now we're supposed to work 24/7 and always answer those emails and those Slack messages, etc. But we've really escalated what we're asking of the modern mother too, right? One of my favorite stats to share is that women today that are working out of the home full time spend more time with their children than women that were at home in the 70s did. So we are asking mothers to spend more time with their kids, and mothers are not just supposed to keep their kids alive, right? They are supposed to be the household chief operating officer and the group therapist of their home and the logistics cruise director, right? We have so many roles. And what's happening is we're kind of defining success as if you're only doing one or the other of those things. And we can't possibly operate that way. But I think to your other point, right, like you mentioned, we're getting maybe the snuggles on the couch or having those moments, and in part of the problem is that we're missing them. Not because we're working, but because we're so anxious and our nervous systems aren't feeling safe to even notice that, right? We're already thinking about the next thing or onto the to-do list or whatever, that we are actually missing the input that, hey, mom, you're doing a really good job. And that's another important piece of it.
Yes. I feel like also we can have a lot of those really, really great moments, right? We can have a lot, we can make sure, they have an incredibly healthy breakfast. Their backpacks perfectly put together, they have a lunch, they are going to school, they have something to do after, they have friends. Like we're checking so many of the boxes and then we explode on them because we're stressed, we're maxed, and bedtime isn't going smoothly. And then we just wallow in that guilt. We tend to forget and mute all of those really positive things that we had done, and instead we just hyper focus on, God, I failed yet again in bedtime. Do you find that that happens all the time with the people that you work with?
Absolutely. It's so funny you say that because the exact scenario just came up yesterday in a group I was leading. And one of the things we were talking about is it's really hard when it's right before bedtime because you don't have that repair opportunity. So you're just sitting with that guilt all night long and it feels so painful. And I think this really touches on perfectionism. And I have so many clients that will say, "Well, I'm not a perfectionist. I don't have to have things perfect. I don't
Oh,
expect
I'm
myself to
I'm
be."
100% a perfectionist.
Right, and I call myself a reformed perfectionist, right? But it is, I think even for people that wouldn't use that label, it often shows up with parenting in that black and white thinking, right? I yelled at them once, I'm a horrible mother, and that behavior defines my character, and I have now failed. And that's the shame that people are sitting with, as opposed to, I'm a human. Humans lose their cool sometimes. This is an opportunity for repair. And of course, all these things are so much easier for me to say right now than to feel in that moment, right? I have definitely done the nighttime guilt spiral along with everybody. Um, but that's the frame we want to take. And I find that one thing that can help is to think about your kid as an adult. And they come to you and they say, Mom, I lost it on my kids today. I am the worst mom. And what would you say to them? Right? You wouldn't say,
Mm.
yep, you're a horrible mother, right? Like, right? You would give her a big hug and you would say, of course that happens. It's okay. You can talk to her, your kiddo in the morning. It'll be fine. And you'd soothe that person. And we can kind of learn to do that for ourselves, even if it's really uncomfortable at first.
Yeah, I think we often blow past the power of repair and we think that, well, what if I just had to repair less because I do so well during the day? Then I wouldn't
Yeah.
have to repair, right? Then I'd actually be proving to myself that I can emotionally regulate, that I can do this. And what I work with my parents all the time is like having like a really solid understanding of what those emotional practices look like for you because in the heat of the moment, deep breaths don't often get us there. Like, I have a severely ADHD child, and we're rolling from one emotional dysregulation event to the next dysregulation event. Like, even
Oh,
just this morning, we had like a 10 out of 10 morning, and I was like, patting myself on the back. I'm like, props to you, Becky. Props to you. Like, you complimented him. Like, I actually like try really hard to make sure I'm like giving the positive because it's not always easy to give the positive feedback. So I'm like, wow, that was such a great job that you did. Like you did that, and I'm like pointing him out. And I'm like, good job, good job. And I'm like, pumping myself up. And then we get to drop off and we're trying to figure out because they have an after school program and we also have baseball playoffs tonight. And so I'm like, okay, well, we might have to switch up the baseball times. And he comes in hot saying, well, if you pick me up at this time, I'm instantly going to be in a bad mood. And you know how that goes. And I was like, the threat? Like you're threatening me? And then I'm like, well, that's not how, and then I'm trying to, stay the course of like, this is a great morning, like have the good drop off, like make sure that you have this like connected moment before you leave. And then I'm like, well, this sucked, like it just, and then you sit there and you're like, well, he's going to go to school and he's going to feel whatever he feels. And I'm going to have to go to work and I'm going to have to feel this lingering thing. And it gets, when that's happening, wash, rinse, repeat, it really like
yeah.
it makes you just it starts to create this narrative in your head that like, can I actually handle these tough moments? Can I do it all?
Yes. Absolutely. So, first of all, I love that you said that the deep breaths don't always work. So, my oldest two are neurodiverse. My oldest is autistic and ADHD, and my second is ADHD. And I remember when my oldest was little, I like stupidly tried to talk to him about taking deep breaths.
How
And the
dare you?
response was, never tell me to take a deep breath, mommy. That's stupid.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I got it. Message received loud and clear. But even for me, right, even though I practice mindfulness, sometimes breathing is just not super accessible. And I get that. But I think, two things I want to say is one is like, if we were perfect parents and constantly responsive 100% of the time, we'd actually be doing our kids a disservice because they would be woefully equipped to interact with other real human beings in the world that will disappoint them, that will frustrate them, that will not respond the way they hoped, right? And it's not that we have to court messing up with our kids, but it's okay that it happens. It gives them the opportunity to learn how to repair and how to talk about hard feelings with people in a really safe way, and we role model that. So there's that piece. But I think the other part that I kind of hear you getting at with that story too is that especially when we have kids that we really have to do a lot of emotional regulation for them, and that's what's happening with ADHD a lot of the time. that's a whole extra drain on ourselves. And that's where it's so important to kind of think about, how am I going to take care of myself so that I can take care of my kid? And that
Yes.
taking care of myself might not be an hour at the spa, right? Like for me, sometimes it is like, can I have my headphones in for a little while so it just cuts the noise down in the house? Or can I, have a cup of hot tea when, for like 5 minutes, right? Like little tiny moments of joy that I can kind of fold into my day. Because these are kiddos that are also harder to get help with. And I don't want it to sound like, yeah, just take time away from your kids. That's the solution. That can be great. But if you're in a space where that's not an option,
Yeah.
it's kind of like, where can I just notice any moment that's going well or that I enjoy during the day?
Yeah. Totally. And I think that kind of plays to one of your core tenets of like, what's healthy striving and what's the unhealthy striving? Because that self pressure to be the person that is your ADHD child's emotional regulator, right? And to be the person who keeps it together and models it perfectly. Because I know, a lot of my clients, they're doing it independently, right? They're doing it. Maybe even if they're in partnership, their partner's not on board with this kind of skill set. And so it does feel like if I don't get it right, my child will end up, I hear all the time, in jail, jobless, no friends, a drain on society. Like those are the fears that we hold so tight to the heart.
Mhm.
And it can create this really unhealthy striving towards doing it all, knowing it all, having it all, like solving everything for everybody so that like we can mitigate some of these challenges.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so important that you use that word fear, because that's kind of at the heart of it, right? And I'll even add, like, I don't know about your listeners, I had a childcare provider quit because they couldn't handle my kids.
Mhm.
And like that's very real. They are harder to manage when, now they're teenagers, and it's still challenging, but certainly when they were younger and we weren't even really clear on what was going on with them, it felt impossible to even get help. Um but I think that fear piece, that's the difference between healthy striving and unhealthy striving, is the fear. When we're in that unhealthy striving place, we are afraid and we are running away from the thing we're scared about. And because of that, it feels like we can never stop. We can never rest. It is a hyper vigilant state constantly. And there's like a sense of, I can relax when? Like, I can relax when my kid's behavior calms down. I can relax when I don't know, get them into college in 18 years. I can relax when I get the promotion, whatever it is. And the problem is, you get that thing and you can't relax because it didn't actually solve anything,
Mm.
right? And so you're just exhausted. You can't white knuckle your way through your entire parenting journey. It's not going to work. And so what with healthy striving, it is really going after something that feels more aligned and true. And now with work, that might be a goal that you're actually interested in rather than the next promotion simply because that's what you're supposed to want. With parenting, part of it might be like, what can my kid do? What are they capable of? Where maybe my instead of being ambitious for their, grades or their future careers, it's like, can I be ambitious for any point of connection I can find with this kiddo? Because again, I know from my own experience, it can feel even hard. There are days where that feels very, very, very hard.
Can be a
Um,
rolling day that over the course of years where that feels
Yes,
very, very hard.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And so if it's aligned and it's something we can really kind of aim towards in a way that feels good, it's more exciting. Right. It's not afraid of the bad thing. It's, what am I going after that I'm excited about? And kind of loving on my kid or finding the places that I can delight in them, even when that feels really hard. And then in that, there's a lot more permission to rest for, you being a part of the equation, for your kid to be who they are. In that, there's a lot more permission for mistakes, right? And for learning through the mistakes rather than seeing the mistakes as failures. It's just a much more expansive version of striving, and it feels so much better to be in that. Um,
Yeah.
and I think sometimes people will hear me talk about it and be like, that's great in theory, but you can't get there. And yet you can, right? It is these like little tiny steps towards what's a goal that feels like it's the thing I actually want as opposed to the goal of I just don't like this?
Yeah. A couple things like pop into my head as you say that. There's an innate sense of control that comes from that too, right? If we can control it, then the fear might not actually come true. And then as we're controlling, like you said, it ends up being this like really tight vice, white knuckling grip that we have
Yeah.
on our children, on the situation. And then we are viewing these from like, I'm either out of control or I'm in control, and it's from a self place of I know it's going well because everything that I thought and everything that I'm orchestrating is working out to the way it should be, which then again puts us into that unhealthy striving because then we are the puppet master. Then we are actually people aren't able to independently do anything because they have to rely on us because we do it all, right? So there's that part. And then the other thing that you mentioned is, what can I actually achieve? What can I actually control is kind of the thought that
Yeah.
that pop into my head because you can't control the ADHD brain. You can't control your ADHD child's impulses. You can help them mitigate those challenges, but something that I have started to try to implement is is a reminder system for myself of how can you fall back in love with your kid today? Not to say that I'm out of love with my kid.
No, no,
Like
I
that's not what I'm
totally
saying.
get it.
But, like, how can you see them through a lens of, like, adoration? How can you see them through a lens of, "Wow, you are spectacular," versus, "Oh my god, you just did it again," And, like, how can I find every day is not gonna be like that, but when I can continue to remind myself that this is a relationship.
Yes.
I think we often forget that it's a relationship. And, my husband and I have been together for over 20 years, and that's a long time to be with somebody. And there are many pockets of conflict because you have people coming in with different ideas, different opinions, different perspectives, and they don't always align. And especially with the ADHD brain, they're not aligning with the standard typical way that life is done. And so there are so many opportunities for pockets of conflict. And when we are in that unhealthy striving control, I need to fix, I need to prevent, I need to like their behavior is a direct reflection of how good I am as a parent, right? When we live in that space, we are quite literally blind and blocked off to seeing the awesomeness in front of us. And I've gone through cycles of that in my own parenting. There's ebbs and flows where I'm like, "Oh my god, like he's definitely going to jail." And then there's moments where I'm like, "This kid's going to save the world," right?
Yep.
Like, there's so many of those moments, but I think having those systems for yourself, those regulation systems, those abilities to say, my goal today is to not correct anything and to just fall in love. Or my goal today is to do whatever feels like you're saying feels aligned, which then opens up possibilities. And then we're not rigid and fixed in this fear-based mindset.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the things that, I think I really had to work on as a parent with my kids when they were younger was divorcing their behavior from my motherhood report card, right? And I think what's really tough about that is externally, we as mothers get judged for our kids' behavior. Other people will say, "Your kid's acting out, you're not controlling them, and that's a you problem," rather than, "Hey, this is a kid that has a different brain, is having a hard time." People will not be that generous. And while that is true, I still had to kind of work on shifting that internal knowing for myself that, like,
Mhm.
I could be doing a great job mothering, and he might still be doing something that is not a great behavior or making poor choices, and those aren't a reflection of my worth. And if once I was able to, like, kinda step back from that, it didn't feel like of course, I still want him to make healthy choices for himself, but it didn't feel um, quite as scary. Like that control piece, I was able it wasn't as fearful. I could let go just a little bit, not to say, "Yeah, peace out, kid, you're on your own," but to say, "Okay, I don't have to take this quite as personally," or think about how everybody else is judging me, right? It brought up all of my own stuff around perfectionism and being a good kid and following the rules and all of the things that I did as a child.
Yeah. Yeah. I read something that was like, if you want an immersive experience in therapy, start your own business, right? Because all of your fears are going to arise, all of your self-judgments, all everything's going to come to the surface, and you're going to have to deal with it because you're going to have to deal with it fast in order to have your business succeed. And I'm like, here's another play on that. Start a parenting company with an ADHD child and continue to have the ADHD child show up the way that they do in spite of some of the efforts, and put that on blast, and then also share publicly, these are still the current struggles. I run a parenting company and teach parents around the world every single day on strategies on how to mitigate the challenges and build skills and build these emotional, regulation practices. And still there are bumps in the road, and still it's hard. So, you're absolutely right. Separating because we can't control them. We can teach, guide, support, all of those things, scaffold, all of the beautiful things, and they still have freedom of choice.
Yes.
And that is really hard when you have that perfectionist tendency, when you have, background in people pleasing, when you have, your worth tied to other people's opinions. That can get really, really hard. If you're a parent to an ADHD child, you know what your day looks like. You're correcting from the moment they wake up. Get dressed, eat your breakfast, stop hitting your brother. Oh my goodness, put your shoes on. I literally just said, put your shoes on. And you're patient. You really, really are. Until you hit that tipping point where you've said the same thing 40 times and something snaps. You yell, they react, you see their face, and the guilt is immediate. You are not a bad parent. You are simply a parent who needs a better system. And I'm hosting a free live masterclass called Stop Yelling. I'm going to show you exactly why the cycle keeps repeating and how to actually break it. Not with more strategies, but with a system that works for the way that your child is wired. It's free, it's live, spots are limited, so go into the show notes right now and save your seat. I'll see you there. Is this kind of falls into line? I know you've mentioned before the ambition paradox. Is this kind of what you're talking about, or can you expand upon that a little further?
Yeah. So expand upon it. And I think there's like a whole additional piece when you have kids with extra needs, right? So with the ambition paradox, it's this idea that, motherhood and work are pitted against one another. And the only good way to be a good mom is to not care about your work and leave your work behind and put all your time into motherhood. And the only good way to be an employee is to pretend you don't have a family, right? And what happens is in order to solve this unsolvable problem, right, of like you can't do both of those things, we in particular as mothers kind of spread ourselves thinner and thinner and thinner until we are transparent in our own lives, right? It's like I will just give everything to my work and everything to home. I will still feel like I'm failing and I will have completely disconnected from myself in the process. And the things fueling that are exactly the patterns you just said, right? Perfectionism, which keeps us focused on not making mistakes, people pleasing, which keeps us focused on everyone else's needs. And the third piece I would call pretending, but basically that idea of like not letting people know how much you're struggling because you're afraid that they're going to think less of you for it. And sometimes even pretending to yourself, right? Of not even acknowledging internally how much you're struggling.
Yeah.
And with the ambition paradox, right? It's created socially. And I think what happens when you have kids with extra needs is it's just that much harder because your kids are going to need you in even less predictable ways, right? And they don't outgrow that unpredictability, right? I have teenagers and will still have to leave work or cancel clients because something has come up that I need to help with.
Hmm.
And that is just the reality, right? And like, so to your point of like, have a parenting business, have a business or try to show up at work and have a kid with an extra need, and you're going to have a lot of personal growth to do. Like,
Yeah.
no choice, right? And to kind of get out of that paradox, you have to do exactly what we started talking about, right? Which is kind of get at these patterns of people pleasing and pretending and the perfectionism, um, because if you don't, you just keep doubling down on the same solutions over and over and over again, and you run yourself into burnout.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that you really focus and help mothers come back to themselves, right? That's really at the heart of what you teach. That's the heart of your book is, figuring out a way to I love how you said we do become transparent, right? We or translucent. We are spread so thin that we've lost so much of who we were before motherhood. Like I was with my husband for God, 13, 14 years before we had a kid. That's so much me, right? That's so much um just so totally different than the role I have now. And you can kind of like it's odd because I feel like my husband is so similar to who he was and his career trajectory and his, everything. It was like I remember he went to a work event like 2 days after the baby was born and I was like, "What? Like you get to go somewhere?" But it was so odd to me that he could leave, and I was just here, and there was nothing left of me in that previous life. So, how do you help mothers begin to come back to themselves?
That is a great question. And I think the very first step is to really get clarity on what are all the masks I'm wearing, essentially? What are all the expectations I'm carrying around? And the best example I use, I've discovered for this, is to think about a closet clean out, right? If you are, imagine you're cleaning out your closet, right? Maybe you're postpartum body, right? Like things don't fit anymore in quite the same way. So you put everything out on the bed and try it all on. And you're like, oh, this sweater is itchy. I can't nurse in this. These pants don't fit. And we get rid of it all. And there's only a few items left. And you put those back in your closet because those are the ones that you know fit and feel good and feel comfortable. We can actually do that with all of the pieces of our identity that we hold. And so I encourage people to take a piece of paper and like write down all of the roles: mom, daughter, spouse, sister, friend, employee, whatever, manager, whatever the roles are, and what are all the expectations that come with each role. And what I find is that in and of itself is kind of daunting. Like you start to realize you're carrying around a lot of expectations, and
Mhm.
there's a little bit even in that piece of it that's validating of why it feels so hard, right? But then you go through and you kind of cross out the things that you don't actually buy into, right? Like you might be carrying around an expectation around your performance at work that you actually don't think is important when you look at it from a more cognitive place. Or it might be like, hey, I was holding this belief about motherhood from my own mom, but I don't think that that's true. Or stuff from social media, or a thing a teacher said one time, or watching what your sister does versus what you do as a parent, like all of those things have an impact on you. And you get to say, this does not fit. I am not going to carry this around anymore. Then you can start to think about what are the expectations that are true for me and true for my kids. And I think that's the other piece, right? I have 4 kids. Parenting each one has been a unique experience, and I have to have different expectations for them based on their different personalities and the way that they are in the world, right?
Yeah.
Genetics handed each of them a very different set of cards, and it's not one size fits all. And so that part in and of itself can be really, really healing in terms of thinking about, I don't have to need all of these. Right. And once you do that, there's a little more space. Again, if we stick with the closet analogy, you can look and see, what do I actually need now? Well,
Yeah.
now you can say, what do I actually want? Like, how do I want to define this stuff? What do I want for myself, let alone for my kids, now that I've gotten all rid of all the clutter? And
Right.
that's, again, much easier said than done. But
Yeah.
that's where you start to find space for those little teeny whispers of desire.
Yeah, that's something that is like the first week you work with me inside the program. Uh, I actually track. We pen to paper or fingers to computer. We track those really intense emotional moments so that we can actually have some data because we can go from emotional response to emotional response to emotional to what does this say about me to all of these different things that they become so intense, and then that starts to feel like it's almost our identity, right? Is just
Yeah.
this rolling wave of emotional, like everything's complex, everything's too much, everything's this, everything's that. But then when you actually break it down and map out, like you said, take everything out, put everything out, list it all, then you get to take this, like, different perspective, almost like you're coming in from a as not yourself, right? And
Yes.
you can look at the data and be like, "This this can actually be solved," or, "I can get rid of this," or, "Wow, I do this every single time that this exact thing pops up." And it's not to say that these things aren't highly emotionally charged, because they are, but these are tools in which we can start to utilize so that everything doesn't feel so heavy, so uh like needs to happen in the moment, so urgent, right? A client said to me yesterday, she's like, I constantly feel like I'm in triage. Like I constantly feel
Yes.
like I'm
Yeah.
triaging every moment. And I can't, that hasn't left my head, because I'm like, that is the perfect depiction of what it feels like from going from moment to moment to moment to moment in motherhood. It's like, I gotta triage this, I gotta triage this, I gotta triage this. And so how can we look at it from a data perspective so that we can fully see the picture, not just the emotion behind it? And then from that place, start to delegate, delete, get rid of, and, start to bring the things that you care about back into your life. Like, I work out every single day. It's something that is really, really important to me. It's something that, I won't negotiate around that. But I was trying to fit it in, like, in the day. I was
Yeah.
trying to, like, just squeeze it in. Maybe if I'm on a Zoom and I'm, muted and not showing my screen, maybe I can, like, manage the time there. And it was leaving me feeling super overwhelmed. It was leaving me feeling, just like, "Oh, God, I didn't get it in today," which is not negotiable. And so I did the hard thing, and I woke up an hour earlier, and I've been doing that since January, and it's completely changed the output of my whole day. Did I have to stop watching the show at night to go to bed an hour earlier? I did. Did that feel like, God, I shouldn't have to do this? It did. But it was a reframe of, like, what actually matters and what doesn't, and why does it matter? Like, what value is this associated with? Like, yes, do I love to just, like, not have anybody talk to me and I can sit on the couch for the very first time and I can kind of glaze out? Yes, but I can also do that sleeping. And so I had to really prioritize and say, what is leaving? Because I actually can't fit it all in. And I think that's like a myth that's like the mom can have it all. I actually think that I don't know if we can. I don't know if we can have it all. We can have large chunks of things, but we need to be able to prioritize so that we actually have space, because there isn't room to have all of this and all of this. It's like, how can we weave things in together to find the balance? Because, like you were saying, we've been forced to either give up the career and focus on motherhood, or give up motherhood and focus on the career. So, truly, we've been fed this, like, oh, you can do it all. You can have a career and be the perfect stay at home mom. And it's just not reality. So, it's like, where can we weave the most important prioritized pieces into our life again? And, like, it takes intentionality to sit down and be like, what do I care about, versus plowing through the moment.
Absolutely. I mean, I love so many things that you just said. And I now also work out first thing in the morning at like 5 because my kids are older, right? So my youngest is 10. Nobody's getting out of bed before 6 in the morning without me waking them. And I acknowledge that when they were little, that would not have been feasible. They were all, especially some of my neurodiverse kiddos, were early birds. But to recognize what is it I value and how I can have it all if I get to define it all. And
Yeah.
that's the difference, right? Because I think that you can have it all message also becomes you should have it all and you are
Mhm.
failing if you haven't figured it out, right? And that's garbage. So instead, what is it all to you? And what does that look like? And how do you want to define it? And also recognize that you get to define it for a season at a time, right? And there have been seasons in my life where my kids' needs have been real, real high, and my work has taken a very small backseat. And now we're at a place where it's kind of shifting temporarily, and it's going to probably move again back and forth in ways that I can plan, and also in ways that I cannot plan. Um, and all of that's okay, but it is constantly feeling like I am being intentional, not in control, but intentional with how I respond to the things that are as they're coming in,
Yeah.
and kind of being honest with myself about what's important to me.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like I needed to hear that right now because I'm heading into summer and I become the default parent for 6 straight weeks. And I can't do both. Like, I can't do both. I could do both, but I wouldn't do it well and I'd be very upset. Do you know what I mean? So it's like,
Yes.
so then it becomes, okay, what is the priority? And what needs to happen? And what do I want to have happen? And how do I find the balance? And what takes 50% one day and what takes 100%? It's just like it, yeah, it takes a little bit of thought and it takes some mapping out and planning. But when we do that, I always feel like when you have a plan, it replaces the panic and it replaces um, that hurried, I have to fix it mentality. And we can actually, like you said, kind of trust that it's going to work out because it does flow. It does. We are seasonable. No, seasoned be like seasonal. Yeah,
There you go. I was
we
like,
are.
I know what she's going for, and I can't
Yeah.
find the word either.
Yeah, we are seasonal beings, and I think that's important to remember. Like like we're used to cozying up and cuddling and like hibernating in the winter. There is a bloom in spring, and so but we go full gas all the time. So learning how to listen to what your body needs as opposed to like feeling that pressure of you have to go 100% all the time.
Yeah. I mean, it was literally just talking about this in a group the other day with a client who is in a academic type position and kind of got to the end of the semester and was sharing that that felt like historically it's like, well, now I have to go into perfect self-care and I have to start doing my workouts and I have to do X and I have to do Y. And she was able to recognize, well, wait a minute. Actually, what my body is telling me is no, I don't want to do any of that. Maybe I just have to sit and stare at a wall for 2 days. And that's okay to have that need and to like, again, trust that you will regulate.
Yeah.
And when we have kids that struggle with regulating, I think that trust is a lot harder,
Yeah.
because there's just this sense of like, when is it going to happen again? When are they going to blow? And the reality is we're not going to necessarily be able to know. And you still get to try to take some rest, even if that's going to happen.
Absolutely. And I've loved having this conversation with you. Where can people find you? I know you have a book. So where can people buy your book?
Yes, yeah. So the book is called Ambitious Mother: From Surviving to Thriving in Your Career and at Home. And it shares some of the things that we were talking about today in terms of the healthy striving model. I have interviewed amazing women about how they are making work and motherhood work and what they are ambitious for in this season of their lives. Um, and so it's got useful tools, it's got clinical storytelling, it's got a little bit of my own journey. And people can pick it up anywhere books are sold or at my website, which is drannwelsh.com. You can follow me on Instagram or LinkedIn, also at Dr. Ann Welsh. And if folks order it before the 6th of August, which is the release date, they can also get access to some really helpful pre-order bonuses, including a couple 2-minute mindfulness exercises that are always very helpful when we don't have a lot of free time, and some scripts for hard conversations, and a lot of other goodies that, again, that people can download and use right now in their lives.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for pouring into the moms who are listening to this podcast and, helping them feel like it's not just them. They're not the only person. You wrote a book about it. Like that's how frequent and common this is. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. Everybody go check her out. And thank you again for being here. We will see you next week. Thank you for listening to the Responsible Parenting Podcast. If you like what you heard, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. If you know someone who would benefit from this podcast, I'd be honored if you'd share this episode with them. Until next time, know that you are enough, you are capable, you've made it through all of your hardest days, and we will keep growing on this parenting journey together. This podcast was produced by Kim Kelty and myself, Becky Jennings, and edited by the Kelty Method, Branding and Podcasting.